Welcome everyone, I'm Ashanthi. Advocata recently hosted an event titled Housing for All, the Role of Competition Policy in Construction. This event featured a double panel session and was based on the study on the impact of anti-competitive practices in the construction industry on housing for the urban poor in South Asia. This study was a regional one, and Omar here helped us with the Bangladesh side of the study. He was also a panelist at this conference, and he joins me now for this discussion. Omar, how are you?
Hi, thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for joining us as a panelist at the event, and thank you for being here as well.
Thanks to Advocata for arranging this conference. This has been a great experience.
So this is your first visit to Sri Lanka,
Yeah.
am I right?
Yeah.
So how do you find it?
It's absolutely beautiful. Colombo's architecture is marvelous.
Oh, okay.
And I really like how well the traffic is managed.
That's great to hear. I'm glad that we left a good impression on you. So before we begin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm working in Sanam as a research associate. I've been working at Sanam for the last 4 years.
Okay.
So the study on the anti-competitive practices in the construction industry and its impact on urban poor's access to housing. This is actually the first time that I worked on something like that.
Okay.
Where we investigated the malpractices and the anti-competitive practices in the construction industry.
Okay, so was this a field you were always interested in, or was it just did it just fall into your lap and you suddenly?
Well, to be honest, when I started working on the project, that's when I really got interested in the whole idea of the construction market and the issues that urban poor are facing.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I did not really have much thought about this whole
Prior
sector.
to this.
So before I started working in this.
Thank you for that brief history. It seems like you had a lot of experience in different areas of economics.
I would not say a lot. I just worked on several projects.
Okay. You said 4 years, you said, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's just jump into the discussion, right? So the shortage of affordable housing is an issue that many countries in the region face, right? I know here in Sri Lanka, it's one that affects all of us, as in Bangladesh. Now, can you tell me, right, during the course of this study, what were the key findings that you discovered? Could you maybe quickly run through that?
Yeah. So first of all, when we started working on this project, what we wanted to see is that what are the anti-competitive practices? There are many kinds of practices in theories, right?
Yeah.
So what are the practices that are being sustained in the industry in Bangladesh? So we started talking to urban experts, we started talking to government officials and people who have been working in the industry for a long time.
Okay.
So the thing is that all of these people, all of those whom we interviewed, and we also went through a lot of literature, newspaper articles, reports, and papers, things like that.
Okay.
The thing is that none of these sources could actually substantiate or verify the claim that there is anti-competitive practice.
Okay.
And in fact, you will find reports by certain international business intelligence firms where it may be mentioned that the construction industry and the housing sector in Bangladesh is quite competitive, if not highly competitive.
Okay.
So
these are, can I just ask, are these falsified reports?
Or? No, not at all. Because if you look at the market, there are a lot of players.
Okay.
So with this association, there are probably more than 1,000 companies that are registered.
Okay.
So apparently it's a competitive market. Okay. And there are not really much anti-competitive practices, apparently. But when you talk to the people who have been in the industry and who have been working in this sector, they would tell you that no, that is not the case actually. There are anti-competitive practices, but you cannot find any recorded evidence to back up that claim.
Okay.
So the thing is
so it's
that
just basically anecdotes, right?
Yeah,
People are telling you, okay, this is...
Yeah, it's kind of anecdotes, but when you are working in a sector or industry for 10 or 15 years or more than that, you know what are the dynamics of that sector.
Yes, you know how it works.
Yeah. And the thing is that since we got this idea from multiple sources, not just one source who was just saying that it's not like that they were just trying to answer our questions.
Okay.
So there are multiple sources who are saying that there are anti-competitive practices, and then they also added this, but it's difficult to find hard evidence for that.
Okay.
So that's the first challenge or hurdle that we came across.
Actually, now that you mentioned that, we also had a similar issue, right? Because we also had instances where people in the industry are aware of it, right? On some level, they have an understanding that
Yeah.
these things are taking place. But then also, when you ask them outright, they're not always willing to tell you exactly what it is. So that was, yeah. So that's why I
There's a
resonated with
lot
that.
of hush involved here.
Yeah.
And also, I would say that due to the sensitivity of this issue, a lot of people are hesitant to talk about
No,
it.
that's
So
understandable,
it's
right? Because it's a
really
very
difficult, even
sensitive
when you are
issue.
guaranteeing that there will be anonymous, and this is just for the study, things like that. People are
You have to
really hesitant to
reassure
talk about. Yeah, you
them.
have to
Yeah.
reassure them repeatedly, and then really work on your questions to get the answers.
Yeah. I remember when we were doing the KIS also, like we had to be very careful how you word the things
Yeah.
also, because you say the wrong thing and then people are going to get scared and not talk about it,
Yeah.
right? So yes, that's a pretty, because it's a very sensitive area,
Yeah,
right?
and
You know?
when we were having the cross country meetings, so it was reassuring to know that the study team in Sri Lanka are actually facing similar kinds of
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
So we feel that okay, so we are not the exceptional. This
Yeah.
is happening in other
I
places.
think it's a pretty common phenomenon
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
You know, I mean, I think across the region they all have that same issue of
Yeah.
not actually being able to come out and say, okay, these are the issues,
Yeah.
right? We always just find out in other ways. So what were the other issues? You said that was one.
Okay. So then when we started to understand like what were the practices, then we found that there are in fact quite interesting dynamics in this industry.
Okay.
So in Dhaka, there are a lot of market players. And if you go to Dhaka, if you visit Dhaka, you will see that a lot of under construction buildings.
Okay.
So the thing is that again, it would appear that there are a lot of players, and the market is really open and competitive.
Okay.
But then when we started talking to people, they told us that there are actually some invisible lines around the city. So there are certain market players
Okay.
who have kind of divided the city among themselves.
Okay.
Right. So and this is also happening in other urban areas as well.
All right. So,
So
wait, can I just ask how does that work? Because you mentioned this just at the event also, right? And I wanted to ask, how exactly do they divide? Like.
So the thing is like that. Suppose there is an area A, and
Okay.
among 10 areas.
Okay.
Okay. So there will be 3 or 4 companies who will only be working in area A.
Okay.
The other companies will not be allowed to work in area A.
Okay.
So if someone wants to start some work in area A, there will be some conflict of interest and things like that.
Okay.
So this is a very implicit, unwritten agreement, and
Okay.
this is done very discreetly.
Yeah.
But there are things like that.
But like the property developers kind of know, okay, this
Know
is
that
not our
where
turf.
they can operate.
It's like that.
Yeah.
Okay. That is very fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't really have anything like that here, I don't think. But that's very interesting. Okay, sorry, I will cut you off. Carry on.
No. So another thing is that if you look at the price trend of the apartments and the housing units in
Okay.
Dhaka, so over the last 2 decades, I would say these apartment prices have gone like 400 to 500%.
Really?
Yeah. So per square feet. And there are certain areas that are considered more elite, that are considered upper class neighborhoods.
Okay,
So
yeah.
the prices are obviously higher there.
Yeah.
But in the areas that are not so upper class, that are not perceived as upper class neighborhoods, the price is not really that low. So wherever you go in Dhaka, in the metropolitan, so the price for land, the price for housing in it is always high.
Okay.
And absolutely out of reach for the urban poor.
Okay.
One of the
even in like the areas that are technically more
that are probably not perceived as
they're
elite
perceived, yeah.
or like upper class neighborhoods, even in areas there.
Okay.
So one of the reasons that apartment prices have gone so like increased this manifold is that the prices of land is a major factor.
Yeah.
So if you look at the land price in Dhaka, you would see that the trend is similar to the apartment prices. So the thing is that land prices have gone up over the last 2 decades.
Yeah.
And so has the apartment prices and the prices of the housing units.
Okay.
So there is also some kind of a collusion among landowners. So the thing is that since Bangladesh is a densely populated country and Dhaka is the center of the whole economy, so there has been a lot of rural to urban migration.
Okay.
And most of the major businesses, the government, they are all in Dhaka. So as you can imagine, the real estate price in Dhaka should be obviously higher. But the thing is that what we found in our interviews, that there are collusions among the landowners also.
Okay.
So that is also one of the reason that the land prices have gone up.
All right.
It would have been higher had there not been collusion,
Okay.
but because there is collusion, the
It's
price
a
is
lot
like
higher
more.
than
Yeah,
it should have been.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. And this is one of those things that you found out, like, I mean, like you mentioned earlier, right? You said people don't come outright and say it, but
Yeah,
this is what you
yeah.
found out like that.
This
Okay.
is how things are. Again, this is very implicit agreement
Yeah.
and unwritten,
Yeah.
done very discreetly.
Okay. So what other findings did you come across during your study?
Okay, so there is another very interesting thing that although there are a lot of market players, but for a new entrant, so for someone like, let's say, if I want to enter into the construction industry tomorrow, that would be quite difficult.
Okay.
So because there are a lot of players and a lot of stakes is involved.
Okay.
So for a new player to enter the market and start operation and then gain prominence, that's a whole difficult thing. This is not exclusively about the real estate sector. I would say this is more or less common in other sectors as well, but
Okay.
for the real estate sector, the idea that a new player would be entering the market, this is something perceived as very sensitive by the other market players.
Okay.
So there is some invisible barriers for new entrants.
Okay. So when you say invisible barriers, do you care to specify, or?
For example, like if you would like to start a company on that,
Okay.
like you may face some hurdles through bureaucratic processes, and then if you start operating, as I mentioned earlier,
So they use like bureaucracy to kind of stop.
not necessarily, but the thing is that if you want to operate in certain areas of
Okay.
since you have a construction farm, you have to build, right?
Okay.
So as I mentioned, that these farms have divided among themselves
Yeah.
certain areas. So you won't just be able to go in
You
and
can't
start
break
operating.
into that particular market because they won't let you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that's how it works.
So you have to either like reach some kind of a deal with them, convince them, things like that.
Okay. So that's obviously then very difficult for
Yeah.
new players to enter. But okay, can I just ask, because I actually went through your study recently also. You mentioned, right, that there was a lack of monitoring in the market. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. So the thing is that in 2012, the competition policy came into being.
Okay.
So and the competition commission was formed after a couple of years.
Okay.
So the thing is that the competition commission is quite stretched due to its constraints in resources. Because I have talked about this in the panel discussion as well. There are a lot of malpractices and other anti-competitive practices in the whole economy. So the competition commission, which is quite new, I would say, relatively a new organization, and it lacks in resources and expertise.
Yeah.
So effectively, there is not very efficient monitoring in the construction market.
Basically, it's stretched too thin.
Yeah, stretched too thin.
Yeah. Because there's so much.
Yeah, so because the competition commission has to be involved in the other markets as well.
Yeah.
So just like a few months ago, the competition commission has actually investigated the price hike in chicken and egg market.
Okay.
And they had to act on that. So you can imagine that if this is the case with daily necessities, overall it's very difficult for an organization to cover the whole economy.
Yeah.
So in that context, I would say that there is a serious lack of monitoring in the industry.
Okay. One thing I also want to mention, right, because you spoke about this at the event also. You said that up until 2012, you shared the same competition law as was it India? I think.
Pakistan.
Oh,
so
sorry.
actually, this law was from the 1970s, the
Okay.
Pakistan era.
All right.
So in 2012, the new Competition Act was passed.
Okay. So until then, you were still using that same law.
Yeah, I mean, probably this is true for all post-colonial countries, that a lot of the laws are inherited from their colonial history. So there is that.
No, that's definitely the case here as well. So yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, that was interesting to me as well. Okay, one other thing, right, before we move on. You also mentioned, right, a lack of accountability for developers.
So there are some cases that where this thing has happened to actually many people. But again, you will not find recorded evidence. So the thing is that in some cases customers have paid upfront for the prior unit that they are buying, but they have not been delivered that unit in time. And
Okay.
sometimes they have not been delivered at all. And in some cases, the delivery period has taken a lot longer than it was said in the initial contract. So the thing is that in these cases, what can the customer do? Like the logical step is to pursue legal actions.
Yeah.
But the thing is that due to the complexities in the legal procedures, so there is like a general perception that it would be an hassle to do that.
Yeah.
And also, I think that there is also a perception among the customers that it would not be prudent to go against a big company
Out of
in
fear,
a yeah.
basically.
I would not say fear, but they are a bit probably intimidated by the
Okay.
size of the organization or
Organization
the
and
farm and things
yeah.
like that. So here is the thing that the farm that is not delivering its product, so that is not actually delivering the contract. So there is no way that you can hold it accountable unless the aggrieved party acts on it, right?
Yeah.
So and unless if there is an independent third party
Yeah.
who are monitoring the market and then holding the parties accountable, the farms accountable, that you have to deliver on time and you have to
Yeah.
deliver what you said that you promised. So that kind of things are not there. So there is a serious lack of accountability in the market as well.
So let me just get this straight. So
Yeah.
basically, if you're supposed to get an apartment and the firm does not deliver on that,
Yeah.
most people just do nothing. Is that what happens?
Probably they would try to go to the court.
Okay.
But in many cases, what happens is that they get intimidated by the lengthy processes.
And
So
so
sometimes they just give up.
okay.
Because also you have to understand that there is a huge cost associated with
With legal
pursuing legal
proceedings
actions.
and yeah. Okay. Can you now we've gone through like the findings, right? Can you maybe just quickly run us through some of the limitations that came with the study? Because I know you mentioned one was the fact that people didn't always open up about these anti-competitive practices. Was there anything else that kind of hindered you when you were doing this particular?
So there is in general a lack of publicly available data. That's in general.
Okay.
So you can imagine that the construction industry, this is a very niche sector, right?
Yes.
So the real estate sector, it's also a niche
Very
sector.
niche, yeah.
So it is very difficult to find publicly available data on the sector as a whole.
Okay.
And there's been little work done on the anti-competitive practices in the construction industry and how that impacts the urban poor's access to housing.
Alright.
So with regard to literature and data, we really face some challenges because since these are not that much available.
Yeah.
So another thing is that we tried really hard to come up with some kind of hard evidence to back up our claim that there are anti-competitive practices. So since we could not do that, when we were conducting the key informant interviews, so some of the interviews, what they were telling us is that this itself is kind of an evidence. So the anti-competitive practices are there, and these are being done so discreetly and so secretively, so that you do not have any recorded evidence.
Okay.
So there is all that. Another thing is that we looked into public infrastructure projects, and there are a lot of malpractices in some certain public infrastructure projects.
Okay.
So according to an World Bank report, the per kilometer cost of constructing a road in Bangladesh is one of the highest in the world.
Okay.
So there has been repeated revisions of cost in certain infrastructure projects, and with every revision, the cost has gone up. So this is not enough to say that there are malpractices in the projects, but there are allegations. There are some allegations that there are some malpractices.
Yeah.
So
Wait, just one point I want to stop on that. I just want to ask you. So you said public infrastructure projects, right?
Yeah.
Can I ask what exactly is the role of government in housing in Bangladesh? Do they play an active part, or what's it like?
I'm not when I'm saying public infrastructure projects, I'm not exactly saying housing projects. So
Okay,
this is about roads, bridges,
general
things like
infrastructure.
that.
Okay, all right.
There
So
are
they
all-
don't.
Yeah.
So the government doesn't play a part in it.
No, the government does. In fact, it has some, but these are yet to scale up.
I
So
see.
they're having some pilot programs,
Okay.
and those have been quite successful.
Really? Okay. So do you foresee them actually scaling up and
Well,
extending
so
this?
if you look at the National Housing Policy of 2016, and the recent 5-year plan, that is the 8th 5-year plan that is set to from 2020 to 2025.
Okay.
So in both these policies, the government has a strong commitment to ensuring safe and affordable housing for all.
Okay.
And they have set out some visions, some targets and goals to do that.
Okay.
So I would say, since the government is committed and there have been some pilot projects, there have been some really good projects to house the rural poor, the urban poor.
Okay.
So I would say that
You're
in the
pretty
future,
optimistic that-
there are reasons to be optimistic.
Okay, that's good. But yeah. Okay, so I'm sorry. So you were talking about limitations, right? Can we circle back to that? And
sure.
Yeah.
So since we're looking into the public infrastructure projects to get an idea of the malpractices that can exist in the construction, in the housing sector. So as I said, the costs are higher, one of the highest in the world.
Yes.
So from that, from that perspective, we are trying to understand the housing sector. But then again, you would not find much evidence of that.
Yeah.
So this has been an issue throughout the
study.
study.
Because obviously that makes it tricky.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit about issues with accessing housing for like the poor?
So actually, we did a survey of 400 households in 4 major slums in Dhaka. So we tried to understand the demand side perspective. And since the study's key focus is on the urban poor's access to housing, we tried to understand what the urban poor actually thinks about the housing sector and the construction sector, how they perceive the sector, how they think that they can gain from the sector, what they expect from the government, and how they think or what can be done to empower them so that they can own or move to a better housing solution.
Yeah.
So in the survey, we found that a lot of the people who are living in the slums, they are not, of course, not satisfied with their current situation, the dwelling situation.
Yes.
But there are a significant share who are also satisfied with their situation. So one of the reasons may be that probably this is in comparison to what they had been in their previous situations.
Okay, so this was an improvement, basically.
Yeah, so for some of them, this was an improvement.
Okay.
But then again, when we try to understand, when we ask them about what is their expectation for a housing unit, then we understood about their aspirations. So they would actually like to live in a well-structured building with at least 2 bedrooms and other utilities. So I mean that should be the obvious case, right?
Yeah. I mean, everyone deserves a home, right? You can't expect any less from anyone. Yeah.
Exactly. So when we asked them about whether they're willing to apply for government projects and what is their perception on that, we found that many of them do not know the application procedure for the government projects. And for some of them, these procedures, those who have some idea, for some of these application procedures are complex.
Okay.
And this is also true for other issues like financing. So many of these people who are living in the slums, they would be willing to take a loan, a financing for accessing housing. So, but the thing is that for traditional financing, for banks or non-bank financial institutions, the process is very complex for them to understand. And these institutions require some collateral, some guarantees against the loans,
and
which is difficult for these people to.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. So, and this is where the issue of financial literacy comes in.
Okay.
So when we conducted the survey, this is also kind of a limitation because we had, through a survey, when you're giving a questionnaire to 400 people, it's not really possible to explain all the things, right?
Yeah. Obviously.
So when we are trying to explain them about the financial packages, about access to financing for the housing, for many of them, this is like really out of their imagination.
Yeah.
So our surveyors had to explain to them, but still it was difficult to make it clear for them.
Yeah.
So, and another issue is that for many of the slum dwellers, they think that about the competition in the markets, you cannot really expect someone who is working in the informal sector, living in the slums, to have an idea about anti-competitive practices in the construction industry, right?
Exactly, right.
Yeah, but still we try to understand what their perception is about that.
Okay.
So we have kind of a mixed response, but a significant share of the respondents say that they think that there is collusion in the market, among the market players.
Okay.
So that is also some kind of, I would say, not evidence, But as I mentioned, that the perception about the market among the people and among those who actually have a need of housing the most says a lot about the market, right? So
their perception is that it's very restrictive, basically,
yeah,
right? That they can't
a
access
significant share think that this is very restrictive, and a significant share
from
thinks
the government housing to the financing to all aspects of
yeah,
it, basically.
and a significant share thinks that this is one of the reasons that how the prices of housing units is out of their reach.
Yeah. Okay, see, that's actually nothing that we don't really think of sometimes. When we talk about housing affordability, sometimes we look at it just through the lens of price, but we don't think about all these other aspects, right? How the financing is going to work, how they're going to access these different, these different government housing schemes. So that's actually a very good point as well. So during the course of your study, you came up with several policy recommendations, right? Now, I was curious about this as well. In your opinion, which of these recommendations do you think is most likely to be implemented, right? Because when it comes to policy reforms, there's a lot of factors at play, right? There's political influences, economic influences, even like socioeconomic influences, right? And so tell me a little bit about those recommendations, and then kind of just tell me what you think is most likely to be actually implemented.
Sure. So the thing is that when we design the recommendations, so there are actually two aspects to the study. First of all, one aim is to how to ensure competition in the construction industry, and second aspect is that how to ensure urban poor's access to housing. Yes, the two are related, of course, because the assumption is that by making the housing market more competitive, we will probably make it easier for the urban poor to gain access to housing. So for competition, the first thing is that, as I mentioned, that the competition commission suffers from a serious lack of resources and expertise.
Yes. Yeah.
So obviously we need to work on that to expand that.
Yeah.
I would say that the competition commission has been involved in a lot of work, as I mentioned, in the domestic market, and there are reasons to be hopeful about it, about the commission growing further, evolving further in the coming days.
Okay.
So there is a.
So you think expanding their reach is actually
Yeah.
likely
So
to?
it has been quite active in the recent days.
Okay.
As I mentioned, that it really acted fast when the prices in the chicken market
Okay.
and the egg prices went up.
Okay.
Secondly, what we proposed is that the monitoring in the market has to be strengthened. So this can be done through the competition commission, of course. There can be other regulatory bodies involved as well.
Okay.
So, but that might be a bit difficult to achieve without empowering the competition commission.
Yeah.
And even with the competition commission being empowered, since the commission is required to investigate anti-competitive practices in the industry, probably it would be more prudent to give the responsibility of monitoring the construction market to some other bodies.
Okay.
So some details have to be worked out on that as well.
Okay. But do you think there's scope to do that?
So this can probably be done in probably two ways. So the scope of the competition commission can be expanded,
Okay.
or some other regulatory bodies can be empowered to monitor the construction market specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Karen, what are the policy recommendations?
Oh, so the thing is that with regard to urban poor's access to housing, we found that there can be some very innovative policies. And in fact, we talked about this in the conference as well, that the government can actually take up some innovative policies and things like that.
Okay.
So
is this what you're when you referred to the housing schemes that the government was successfully implementing? Is that what you're okay? Yeah.
So as I mentioned, that the government has already in place certain programs.
Okay.
And the policies look good.
Okay.
So in the policies on paper.
Can I ask how long were the like what's the time frame for these policies? Like, have they been implemented for a while now, or is it just a new thing that's?
So the thing is that the housing policy came into being in 2016.
16. Okay.
Okay. And the other plan that I mentioned, it's the 8th 5-year plan.
Okay.
It's set from 2020 and will be scheduled
25.
till 2025.
Okay. All right.
So the government is committed to ensuring access to affordable and safe housing for everyone.
Okay.
So and since the government has already in place some projects, there are some real reasons to be optimistic about that.
Okay.
So the government can actually incentivize the private real estate developers to work on the urban poor's access to housing. This can be in the form of a policy of tax cut or tax incentive, where certain developers or those developers who are working on ensuring urban poor's access to housing will be allowed for some form of tax cuts.
Okay.
So there can also be some regulatory steps. For example, like inclusionary housing, inclusionary zoning.
Okay.
In this case, the government can actually come up with some regulations or policies where some private real estate sector developers will be required to allocate a certain share of their housing units for the urban poor.
Okay.
So, and lastly, and we have also we had some other recommendations as well. But this is something that I would like to mention here is that the government can actually provide direct subsidies to the urban poor so that they can
They can
access
access
housing.
housing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just ask, right? You mentioned now during the course of your survey, you found out that the urban poor had difficulty in accessing finance. They had difficulty in accessing government housing schemes because they weren't quite aware of how they would go about it, right?
Yeah.
Do you see that becoming that issue being solved somehow? Do you see them the government taking steps to maybe improving access to finance, or maybe making it easier for these people to actually access government housing? Is
So,
that something you see?
so what I would say is that since the government is committed and these policies have been designed to understand the needs of the poor, the housing needs of the poor, and these policies have in place certain solutions, certain pathways of how to do that, and they have like certain targets. So it's understandable that since these projects are new, so there will be a lot of complexities initially, but as we move forward, I think the government will be trying to make it more understandable for everyone.
Okay.
So that, and whenever the government is trying to actually giving people access to certain services, they run public campaigns and things like
Okay.
that.
All
So
right.
since this has happened in other sectors, probably in other services,
It's probably
and
likely that
so
they'll
it's
do it.
probably likely so this will happen again.
Okay. So then
And
that should help overcome that issue,
yeah,
right? Okay.
and there is actually another thing that I would like to add. So, as I mentioned, that one of the major issues of urban poor is that their access to financing. So, we also propose that the government needs to work on that as well, and
Okay.
probably come up with some financing solutions, work with the banks and non-bank financial institutions,
Yeah.
so that they can offer some kind of packages or policies for the poor.
Yeah.
The thing is that these banks and institutions have in place offer certain policies and packages, but for housing, but these are mostly aimed for the upper middle income or middle income households.
Okay. Yeah.
So if the government can actually collaborate with the private sector, the financial sector, to come up and design some
Some kind of,
specific
yeah.
policies, financing policies for the poor, that would be actually greatly helpful.
Okay, just one final question, right? Can I ask now? Is Sanam going to be taking steps to kind of push across these policy reforms? Are they doing anything on their end?
So the thing is that Sanem has a strong commitment to public outreach. So
Okay.
whenever we're doing a research or study, we are always trying to convey the findings of the study to the public. So as soon as I think the report is published, we'll of course make it public. And then through our various programs, we always bring up these issues.
Okay.
So we hold regular conferences, seminars,
Okay.
and discussions. And in these discussions, what we do is that we bring into focus the issues that are persisting in market, probably not necessarily in the construction industry, but in general in the economy,
Okay.
and the issues that needed to be addressed.
Okay.
The thing is that the issues that you are facing in the construction industry are not exclusive to this sector, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
these are
It's
these are
pretty common
issues that
across
are
all
all
sectors.
connected.
Yeah.
And you have to have a certain like strong reform agenda to
Okay.
address all those issues, right?
Okay.
So since we are committed to that, so yes, we will be talking more about these issues, and hopefully this will bring in some positive changes.
So, thank you so much, Omar, for first of all, thank you for coming down and actually doing the panel discussion, and thank you for today as well. I know you're taking up a lot of your time with all of this, but I'm so grateful that you're here and that you're willing to share all of this with us. I also want to say this, right? I want to say thank you for like the last, I think it was almost 1.5 years, right? The study. I know it's been like a very long process, but the fact that we were able to kind of, have regular meetings and like share ideas and our like our findings was actually very helpful, right? I think it was helpful to you, I hope, and it was definitely helpful to us as well. So I'm very grateful for that.
I would like to thank you as well. This has been a very insightful discussion. And I would like to thank Advocate Institute. So first of all, the study is really interesting. And I think that one of the benefits of doing a cross-country study is that we get to compare our results and share our insights. And as I mentioned, that learning about the other countries, we get to understand what we are doing right and what we are doing wrong. So this has been really a wonderful initiative, and this collaboration has been really fruitful. And again, thank you for arranging this conference. So the panel discussion was amazing. We had some really good discussion. And lastly, this discussion was also very good. So I would like to thank you for that as well.
I'd also like to thank the viewers for tuning into this discussion. If you would like to access the policy briefs that were done on this particular study, you can find them on our website. Both the Sri Lankan policy brief and the country policy briefs, including Bangladesh's policy brief, is on the website. So please feel free to go and check that out. And if you would like to watch the event that was held on this particular conference that we spoke about, you can watch that on our YouTube channels. Also follow us on our social media pages for more events and conversations like this one. Thank you.
If you are interested in seeing more content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Advocata on all social media platforms to never miss out on our latest content. Consider supporting Advocata by becoming an individual subscriber. Gain access to our weekday media monitoring of economic news, exclusive Advocata events, and more. To learn more, visit us at support.advocata.org.